How's it going, folks? Jeremy Adrian here. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about Ascent Infinite Realm. About a month ago, Krafton, formerly known as Bluehole, and Kakao Games announced that it would be drastically changing its upcoming MMORPG Ascent Infinite Realm to ELYON, and besides the new name, the game would also be undergoing some massive changes. A year ago, ELYON opened a beta in Thailand, which I took part in, and you can watch my impressions video and breakdown of that by clicking the card above or the link found down below if you want to learn more about ELYON, as I won't be covering every detail in this video. For right now, I want to dive deeper into what the game has announced it will be changing and share my thoughts on what else it needs to do in order to survive, because it's looking very likely to be dead on arrival if nothing is done. So let's get started, and the first official change announced would be for the game's combat system. From the gameplay footage of my time in the beta, you'll notice the reticle in the middle of the screen. It's there for all 5 classes, but it isn't a true action combat system. You had to hit the tap target button to find a target, and then once locked on, you can fire away your skills. So what's changing? Krafton wants a true full-action combat system that's more fluid and free, which does away with tap targeting completely, in the mold of games like Black Desert Online. It also wants a more customizable combat experience, and by that, I'm guessing they want to give you more freedom with builds and combos, instead of the linear skill progression it currently uses. I think overall, this is a change that makes sense, seeing as tap target theme park Korean MMOs are quickly running out of fashion these days, despite so many still being released, so it's one way to attract the modern MMO crowd. However, to achieve this, they probably want to look at redoing the animations too, because combat feels very stiff, and that won't look or feel great if it's going full action combat. The next change the developers want to make is to the setting and lore, which is an eyebrow raiser because so much of its promos during its reveal were centered on the game's unique steampunk setting. Prior to the change's announcement, ELYON was about the player making it through this steampunk world in which magic and technology coexists and airborne civilizations ruled. There's also a war between 2 factions, the Ontari and Vulpin, each with different ideologies that will clash in RVR PvP, although the game never really explores that concept enough from a lore perspective. Krafton and Kakao Games have not mentioned what these changes are in the press release, and I for one hopes it's for the better. ELYON does have plenty of Korean MMO tropes lore-wise, like its player origin story, which will feel familiar to many, and I'd like to get more immersed in the uniqueness of being in an airborne world with all the technology at our fingertips, instead of the usual fantasy magic stuff on land. So that means right now we have no idea how drastic these changes would be and how it would impact the game's main narrative and story quests, because most of them do incorporate the game's setting and lore. And obviously the last announced change was to the game's name itself, going by ELYON now. It's amusing how they've hit the reset button and felt like the project needed an identity change as well. And for me anyways, both names are okay, and ELYON will do fine just as long as Kakao gives it the same amount of promotion and marketing, if not more, than it did for Ascent Infinite Realm during its reveal 4 years ago. One of the problems I see is that Ascent Infinite Realm has already received a huge amount of coverage from both media and content creators, so without any further promotions as ELYON and just the announcement of a name change, I feel like most folks would easily forget Ascent Infinite Realm even exists, or won't have a clue that ELYON is the same game a year from now. So that's the official changes announced, and being honest here, I don't think it's anywhere near enough. From what I've experienced in the Thai beta, there are other areas that need revamps too, if ELYON wants a crack at the Western market without being labeled a carbon copy clone of another Korean game currently released. So my first suggested change will be to the overall aesthetics, the look and feel of the game. Jumping into ELYON for the first time, there was nothing about it that looked special graphics wise. The movement and combat animations all look like things I've seen before in another game. For the most part, this is due to what's under the hood, and leads back to the engine the game's built on, which happens to be the dreaded Unreal Engine 3. Never heard of it? Well, you've definitely seen or played on it. In your mind's eye, I want you to picture the gameplay of games like Blade and Soul, Terra, Ion, Blast Online, and Astelia. All of them run the same engine, which is why in some aspects, these South Korean MMOs tend to look and feel very similar. What can ELYON do about it? If Kakao Games wants to win big time, then they should shell out the money and go for the newer, Unreal Engine 4 like what Blade and Soul is going to be doing, or start from scratch with something else? Will they do it? Probably not, because again, it's very costly, and this is at a stage when almost all the content for the game is already done, so it's going to be an immense task to reboot everything. My point is, ELYON doesn't stand out aesthetically, and that could hurt the game if players don't care about the rest of it. The game's questing design is my next suggestion, and I'm honestly surprised that Kakao and Krafton made no mention of content revamps because ELYON definitely needs it in most areas. Simply put, the leveling experience is optimal, but the questing content is subpar. While leveling, you'll go through all the familiar staples like quest hub crawls that fleshes out the zone story, the main story quest chain, and dungeons with additional stories. The regional quests are pretty standard fare and for the most part boring with no excitement, until you get a quest that requires an instanced boss fight or something out of the ordinary, which doesn't happen very often. In fact, the most fun I've had questing in ELYON was when I and a few others just stumbled upon a landscape boss out of the blue, and that's the kind of content that I feel the game needs more of, one that tells the region's story in a more organic way that feels less linear, less scripted, and more involved when it comes to the players around you. All the scripted quest hub crawls are things we've been doing over 1,000 times through other similar MMOs, and it needs to take a back seat. It's 2020 and developers should really start thinking out of the box here. The main story quests suffer a similar verdict too because you've done it before. Since there's no voiceovers, dialogue is broken down into multiple subtitled scenes that you'll have to spam the F key to progress, kind of like the early days of BDO or more recently, like how the storytelling plays out in Astelia. It's just all too ordinary. And then there's the Airships, the game's unique selling point and feature during its announcement, and one we all got excited for because we were about to get a proper steampunk MMORPG, one of the very few that offered an emphasis on aerial gameplay and combat, which definitely would stand out. Today, I'm not so sure anymore. Their decision to change the direction of the setting and lore is worrisome, especially for those that were looking forward to seeing more airship stuff. While they have mentioned that the technology and magic of the world remains unchanged, they never really explained what would happen to its airship gameplay. So, players would get into the airship stuff pretty early on in the game, and you'll do some quests and combat that involve defeating enemies in the air. Controlling and maneuvering in the starter airships felt clunky and it didn't have its own skills. You would use your own class skills in the air, which in hindsight made sense since we're all learning our classes in the early levels. But it never got more interesting the higher you leveled. There wasn't a deep enough ship progression, there was no customization, two facets that would draw players into the system for the long term. In the end, I felt no attachment to it and it was nothing more but a gimmick instead of a feature. You would also end up in these instance story dungeons that had airship and mech style combat sequences that once again felt very gimmicky, more like a minigame in World of Warcraft instead of being a unique feature. Therefore, airship and to a certain extent mech gameplay needs to change for the better to draw players into the system. To conclude this, my feelings are that, yeah, almost all of these changes absolutely need to happen in order for ELYON to have a chance of surviving in the Western MMO market, which is already oversaturated with factory-made Korean theme park MMOs. The amount of games currently out right now offers nearly everything that the first iteration of ELYON showed us in the Thai beta, and they definitely need to stand out from the crowd or it's going to be dead on arrival. So that sums up my thoughts and it's your turn now. If you took part in the ELYON beta last year and have some opinions about these changes, please do so down in the comments. Hit the like button for more videos and feel free to subscribe to the channel. It's free and it notifies you whenever a new video goes live. Once again, I'm Jeremy Adrian, and I thank you for watching.